"He's on his way," a servant said. The king nodded silently. "Should I remain here?" asked the chancellor. The king debated it. With how long it had been, it might be easier to have some company. Still, it felt vaguely inappropriate for the occasion. "You can leave. It's been too long. I think it ought to be a conversation between the two of us." The chancellor bowed before leaving the king in an empty room, alone in his thoughts, calling back to an earlier time. In the Hotel Bavaria, the most powerful figures of Prussia met. The Icrian revolts posed an existential threat to their international order, and the captains of war and industry met to rectify it. The aid given freely to the Alcad was seemingly going to waste in layers of corruption and collapsing morale. The Alcad seemed to be a paper tiger, his reforms promising but his soldiers having no desire to fight the rebels which held the banner of freedom high. Prussian advisors met generals more interested in their careers than the fight. Despite the rebels' weakness, no progress could be made, and a direct intervention, as Schuster repeated, would risk bringing the fight back home. It seemed as if the Alcadet was crumbling from the top to the bottom, as the PVH president stood to declare that he was tired of subsidizing it anymore. This came as a shock to all but the High Admiral, who had agents inside the PVH and was acting as a not-so-subtle proxy for the king. The Admiral broke his silence, saying, "It is not your place to decide on policy. The Alcad cannot fall to revolution. I'm surprised you don't seem to understand the fundamental danger here." There was a pause. The president stood taken aback. "Still, there is no reason policy can't align with economic benefits. Icria has been for some time our largest trading partner. This shouldn't change now. All we need to do is adjust the type of product." The PVH president recomposed himself and replied, "Weapons are already our biggest export now. The issue are the discounts we're giving them." Then remove the discounts and use the opportunity to produce weapons cheaper than before. This isn't just about Icria, it's about the future as well. In a strange confrontation, and without saying it directly, the nation's entire policy towards the Alcadet had been reversed. The king and the admiral had decided in advance, realizing the dangers of being dragged down with the Alcadet. All of their aid was seemingly going to nothing, and the businessmen and moguls were getting tired of funding a costly stalemate. The king knew this, that as long as they could stop the rebels from winning outright, the situation could be salvaged. Still, the king was disconcerted not by the reversal itself, but by how little hesitation he felt doing it. He expected the decision to be a bit more difficult, a bit more painful. He considered the Alcad a friend, was guided by his model of modernity, and though he felt he wasn't doing anything wrong, that the Alcad was responsible for Icria and they both knew it, they should at least feel some guilt for such a turnaround. But he didn't, and that's what scared him the most. He wondered what it would be like to be in the Alcad's place, see it all hang in the balance. The fight was by no means over. The Alcad outnumbered the rebels 3-1, but for whatever reason, the war was feeling more and more like a requiem. The only thing that remained nagging was the idea that this couldn't be it. It was incomplete, the MFA alone, bringing it all down. Something was missing, and no matter how hard he tried, the king couldn't picture what it was. All he knew was that something was bound to change, sooner or later, and all he could do was wait and prepare for some vague future which found itself incessantly just beyond his grasp. The months went by, steady and unceasing, letters in response, updates without news. The war was like a constant, and that atmosphere new realities branched out at home. The king maintained his vision of a sort of international nationalism, and sought to uphold the central pillar even if Prussia had to do it alone. The war became a testing ground for production, that focused more and more on the assembly line than anything else. Trade routes were refined, finance more sleek, the PAZ standing as a central pillar in their own new world. Progress marched on, new buildings towering above the old, and the infrastructure of the future forming a monument which gradually enveloped the people it was meant to serve. The street fights were pushed underground, cornered off in the periphery, popular action kept always out of view. Schuster kept up his special division, now with a branch in Berlin, ensuring that the future would be steeled to the image he saw fit. The admiral read the reports, in every corner of the nation, nothing getting past him. Hardenberg watched the world around, placating the Danes and silently observing Baghdad from afar. And the king, behind it all, sat in his palace, his deputies left with a free hand, but every single word written making it back to his desk, one way or another. One word repeated time and again, gradually becoming an obsession, was that of Ireland. As Icria stood still, Ireland became oddly dynamic, alluring, capturing the attention of almost all the powerful forces, and becoming the crowning piece for what would be the king's new world. Since the very beginning of his reign, Ireland had always been there. The current government asked for weapons during the Dutch crisis, and the king obliged to stiff the French. Ever since, more and more loans have been granted, projects renewed, and investments brought in. The PVH saw it as the bastion for global trade, Hardenberg saw it as a masterpiece of diplomacy, the admiral saw it as the perfect forward base, and the king saw it as the PAZ's next logical step. Unique, however, was the influence of the PZF. Ireland seemed like a money printing machine. The central bank had been expanding that debt further over the years. With the appointment of the young Ferdinand Weber as chief financial officer, more creative methods were undertaken. Intelligence began to show that the newly created Irish pound was based on falsifying gold and enticing foreign investors with other investors' profits. Rather than expose this, Weber doubled down on the loans, hoping to make Ireland entirely reliant on the Prussian mark. He also began directly intervening in the intergovernment disputes of Ireland, answering calls from rival factions for money and influence. When President Costello asked, he'd give it and slip the rest. When Secretary Lynch asked, he'd do the same. And when General McKenna asked, he'd repeat it once more. Weber created a sort of Pavlovian response amongst the Irish leadership, giving always with the knowledge that could be taken away in an instant. Prussia was making itself more than a regional power, and with France and Britain still seemingly in decline, the king's ambition expanded further. The new face of Prussia was symbolized with Fort Hohenzollern, a massive complex in Berlin, replacing Königsberg Castle as a central army command. Built with steam flowing through and extending deep underground, it was a testament to the new world that Prussia sought to create. It was in this building, the furthest depths of its structure, the shadow would be cast of the king's grand citadel. In the war room, surrounded by the high command, the king was briefed on a strange new development. Intelligence reported, though the Alcott had yet to acknowledge, a massive revolt carried out by the Western Army. They were not radicals in the traditional sense, rather something far stranger. Made up of army officers comprised mainly of ethnic minorities, yet fighting above all for a unified national cause. Their motto was strength, through unity, discipline, and action, and their revolutionary fervor was concentrated in a single leader, to which all seemingly had unwavering loyalty. They were the Kansai, and nobody quite knew what to make of them. The Lord General saw through the lens of numbers and guns, like Hamburg, a strange force that could be beaten back through artillery. The Admiral saw it as a concerning development, a new type of radicalism, and a vindication of his weariness surrounding Schuster and the nationalist cause. The king, however, saw it as something different, something existential. It was the piece that was missing, it was the shadow behind him, and his strange feeling grew and grew like fire had been released into the world. It was Schuster that spoke first. The future is here now, let us ensure that we remain part of it. The situation grew more dire by the day, and as the months dragged on, the Kansai's advance remained steady, machine-like. The situation can be recovered, though we need more support. I'll see what I can do, Ambassador. A letter from the Alcott was put on his desk. Letters had soon piled up. The Admiral stood in the doorway. What's the intelligence? Dire. Aleppo has fallen, and a few other points of interest. What's this document? Speech from a close associate of their leader, from Georgie Cask. I feel it relevant. It had a fervor like nothing he'd seen, and most of all, a strange, captivating energy. The road to Raqqa is now open. The rotting corpse of the Alcaide cannot stop us. We lie at a crossroads, the Kansai cause within our grasp, if only we are bold enough to stand up and seize it. He put the note down as the letters kept piling, trying to push them out of his mind. Still, that imperial seal haunted him, as if he'd never escape its image. He grabbed the first letter he saw. Things are different. I know it. My soldiers do too. The Kansai are a new beast, one that has to be pushed back. I know I have asked for much, so I will not ask for any more. Still, they cannot be allowed to win. They are a calamity, I am convinced of it. They are the clouds over the horizon, who will cast the whole world into darkness. I have made mistakes, that I know, but we will hold. I urge you to as well. Your friend, Aviv Nazari. The sun was setting, as the yellow-red flame of a candle illuminated the desk. He saw a new face of the Alcott, a second wind, like his revolutionary tales of old. Still, how long could that last? What could he really afford to do? Your struggle is always in my mind, you can be sure of that. The pain now caught up to him, but not completely. He would not be left behind. The Alcott, however, proved to have some fight left. As the months passed, the Euphrates held, the city of Raqqa standing as a fortress against the Kansai advance. It became a border, metaphysically, between the forces colliding. Still, it all felt so strange. The Alcott brought back morale and a fear for the Kansai, a desire to defend against the face of calamity. The Kansai, however, had something stronger, an unending fanaticism, and a leadership capable of wielding it. It seemed the Khans were winning even without new battles being fought. Time was on their side, and unlike with the MFA before, this uneasy pause was by no means a stalemate. In this purgatory, strange news arrived. We've received, through discreet channels, a representative of the rebels. Should we respond? The king said, a single word that came before any thought, yes. Through secret channels, the two sides met. The Kansai representative was direct and cunning, touching on one of the biggest anxieties of the war, the state of the Parsec. Prussia had invested greatly in it. The potential of its collapse would be devastating. The Kansai went on the attack, saying how Prussia aligned itself with the enemies of the Icrian people, but that the leadership was willing to be pragmatic. There was a special war credit, guaranteed by Frischbohem himself, that could be redeemed in parsecs for triple its value after the war. The information was passed along. Hardenberg was wary, thinking it a betrayal, one that risked their diplomatic reputation and make Prussia intertwined with a potentially hostile regime. The admiral was more sympathetic, not wanting to bend it all on the Alcott. Ferdinand Weber was all in, seeing it as the perfect financial scheme, something ridiculous to refuse. The king weighed the options, but felt his choice already made when he said yes at all. He was wheeling fire, but he couldn't afford not to. Still, Hardenberg's words raised doubt. Eventually he spoke. We'll buy the credits, but bring back the discounts to the Alcott. The difference will cover any lost revenue. The days felt clouded and busy. No time to think about anything other than the world around. A shadow embassy was built with the Kansai, one side and the other balanced on separate hands. The golden epoch seemed 1,000 years behind, the new world rising and sweeping away that which is not within. The Kansai moved with the cold heat, complete transparency and silent cunning, casting off the air of doubt upon all. You can never get too close, but they were never far away. The world was fast yet slow, a state of permanent change which stripped time of its weight. As Ireland joined the PAZ, it wasn't a great accomplishment, but a cycle. It was no longer clear what was progress and what was a trap. The king sat at his table, looking at those imperial seals. He tried to pick one up, but he couldn't. He wanted to write something, to speak words which could change the world, but even if he could, he felt as if he wouldn't. He wished to do more, and realized that feeling was the only thing he couldn't control. The only thing he was powerless over, it seemed, was himself. He laid down to sleep, but found only the darkness of the restless night. In those timeless months, the cycle wound itself to two fatal ends. In Ireland, the banks had collapsed, the Irish pound falling through its own loans and schemes. Most fatally of all, news reached that the Euphrates had been breached, Kansai breaking through by the actions of a rogue general filled with pride. It had become clear before, but now it was here. The fall that was left was very short indeed. Weber tried reaching the king all day, but to no response. Ireland could wait, even if it was more urgent on paper. He read through the reports and felt his heart sink. It was so avoidable, so quick. The Alcott had held, had rallied, but a lone general sought glory, went on the attack, and lost everything for it. In the end, it wasn't the Alcott's mistake that brought it all down, but the system he had created. He wrote a letter, but forgot what it said. All he remembered was signing it as a friend, and through signing it like that, he felt, more than for anything else, guilt. He opened a bottle of Smol Dal Nar and invited in Mr. PZF. Ireland's in free fall. The PVH is panicking, but this is a great opportunity. The Admiral came in, visibly angry in a way that was rare. Are you trying to take down the entire economy? The king paused, a bit numbed. Hear him out. Ireland has more money than gold. Their currency will soon collapse, and we're the only ones that can help. We bail them out, give provisional marks to foreign investors trying to cash in, buy back the Irish pound, and make a new currency based on the mark. They become financial puppets. We temporarily take control of their central bank, bring down interest for Prussian investors, and make the president cut down all tariffs. And Admiral, we can even extend the lease to Fort Vaughan, Woods, and Wexford, make the whole city our treaty port. They'd have no choice but to accept it. The king, staring to the side, turned back to simply say, then do it. And it was done. But Ireland was a deceptive land, one where the further you ventured, the further you became entangled into its web of confusion. The king received a letter from President Costello so baffling he wondered how his advisors let this get to him. It was a plea, demand, compliment, and complaint all in one. It started with personally thanking the king for his intervention in Ireland, calling him the eternal hero of our people, then asked for him to show mercy by trusting the Irish Central Bank once more with its affairs. It then proclaimed that this is non-negotiable, and it is intolerable for the situation to last, let alone by an ally. It ended by asking for Prussia's continued and gracious support, especially against the forces of my government which risked to bring me down, particularly that devil, Richard McKenna. Unbeknownst to the king, Hardenberg had been dealing with Ireland's bipolar diplomacy for quite some time now, the frantic actions of its rulers growing only more unpredictable as the situation deteriorated. And who's this Richard McKenna? He sounds familiar, but I can't quite place it. General, he's been occupying parts of Dublin since the bank run. Should we intervene? I don't think so. We already have Marines at the embassy, and Costello is just as unreliable, if not more. The only one I truly consider a problem is Secretary Lynch. He's the one who spread the word of our involvement and has been agitating to undermine the government from within. Do whatever you see best, Hardenberg. You have my full support. The instability of Ireland was increasingly intolerable to the Prussians in this hour of confusion. The Admiral authorized the creation of the Irish Home Legion, a group of Irish soldiers under the command of his Marines. The Irish army alone could clearly not be trusted, no matter which side led it. Still, the situation scarcely improved. The economic recovery began, but Ireland seemed increasingly on the brink. Just as the buyback was nearing its end, the Dublin Metal Works, one of Ireland's only refineries, catastrophically exploded, killing dozens and burning down the surroundings. This was made worse by a constant drought, unseen in the country for decades. The problems began piling up, not just in Ireland but across the king's domain. It increasingly felt like the world was being balanced on his shoulders, and any time he looked away from one problem, another was burning instead. The radicals, now coalescing under the name of laborists, were mostly subdued but still present. They remained underground in the country's largest cities, many fleeing to neighboring states or fighting for the MFA, where their voices could be freely printed and spread back to home. The king, however, was now thinking at a grander scale, and structural reforms were needed to ensure Prussia's role in a new and changing world. All of the highest generals met in Fort Hohenzollern, as the king announced a set of reforms not seen in decades. Wealth and nobility requirements to become an officer were lifted, recruitment was expanded, and a national military academy was formed. The Prussian General Staff was created, a supreme body to rule all aspects of defense. And most critically, 3 marshals would be created to head it. Lord General Strauss Fischer, Marshal of the Army. High Admiral Joseph Krauss, Marshal of the Navy. And Keon Schuster, Marshal of the newly created National Corps. Schuster held back a smile as this plan was announced, his visions coming closer and closer to reality. He'd be given largely free rein for his new branch, acting as both special forces in battle and as paramilitary pseudo-police to combat more unconventional enemies. The Lord General suppressed his outrage that someone he saw as an inferior, barely of note, was elevated to his status. The Admiral, however, simply sat by. He didn't think that the king was wrong in his reasoning, he simply hoped that he was right. The king read the reports on his desk deep into the night, thinking of the days before, where things seemed less troubled, where he and his guests could sit in the depths of the Grand Palace and forget about today until tomorrow. Now, though, there was no time for that. The news simply got worse and worse, more and more problems flooding his mind. Ireland, the now constant headache, had more bad news in store. Their banks ran out of gold, again, somehow, and a run of the banks began, even worse than before. The entirety of Dublin was aflame, and no Irish force seemed capable of preventing it. The only thing that made the king think twice was a little note, that among the foreign investors who attempted to cash out their currency were the Icrians. There was no more specifics about them, but the king grew anxious. He had a feeling these weren't the Alcott's men. Still, that anxiety was replaced with irritation after the president's letter came. It begged for Prussian intervention, that the Home Legion wasn't enough and that the Marines needed to be sent in. He claimed that he had followed the Prussians' plan to a T and that it was John Lynch who sabotaged it all. This was, as it turns out, completely true, but the king wasn't in the mood for investigating. "Weber, how'd your plan go?" The minister stood shaken, attempting to apologize before the king cut him off. In truth, the king wasn't particularly upset. The scheme was smart enough, and the king and the admiral were already conducting a secret counterfeit operation in the first place. The king called him the admiral, someone he knew could get this sorted. "Send in the Marines, we're dealing with Ireland ourselves." The Marines were sent in, the streets now eerily silent as the new demands are put into place. The Prussian mark would be the official currency of Ireland, the Prussian central bank would have direct oversight, and Wexford Bay would be leased to Prussia for a period of 50 years. Take it or leave it. It was a political crisis in Ireland. The factions were scrambling, but at this point the king was over it all. Prussia would stand back and watch so long as no faction threatened their interests. After a brief power struggle, General McKenna made himself president. Soon after, he declared himself king. Prussia didn't care. Maybe he'd bring some stability at last. All over, the guns briefly fell silent. There are no more letters from the Alcide, and even the Khan's representatives ceased their intrigues. No more orders, they told the PVH envoy. They won't be needed for now. The shadow deals pause, the Alcide's plea is now silent. Something was happening, and whatever it was, Prussia was not privy to it. The king stared at the afternoon sky, as a restless silence disquieted his mind. How much longer could the cycle carry before it stopped in its final place? The fatal rhythm was broken with a flash. The Alcide's imperial forces met at the gates of Raqqa, Khanzai bearing down with the fire of the sun. The jewel of the Euphrates was stained, as the apparitions of a dying regime were destroyed with a crushing and final blow. In the end, it had all come to this. The king saw with an absolute clarity that which had occurred. All that remained was washed away, totally, absolutely. Modernity had found its most frightening face yet. The only thing now left were the memories of before. It's those memories, though, that are most frightening of all. They call back to themselves, circle like lights guiding you to a time forever out of reach. They penetrate reality itself, becoming a fatal glimpse into an eternal past. The images were there, the portraits and tales, the vast cities beneath the ground. It was all within reach, till it at last becomes defined. Those nights in Berlin seemed closer than ever, betraying just how far was now behind. When memories are all that remains, you risk becoming one too. A letter arrived, bearing that seal for the final time. It's become clear that this fight is over. Still, I will not surrender until I have been abandoned completely. I wish you luck for the world you'll inhabit. The king responded, You did all that you could. I will do all I can as well. In the face of the Khanzai advance, the MFA and Azari agreed to a ceasefire. Still, the unholy truce between the original enemies did little now. Friedrich Wilhelm's armies lay at the gates of victory, and neither the old force of Nazari nor the revolutionary fervor of his once friend Amar could halt it. On the road to Mosul, taking up direct command, Nazari led against a wave crashing down. In the swan song of the old Ikria, he achieved a shocking victory against his old rival Heinz Ezekiel. In that brief moment, it felt like the days of old, where he navigated through the rough and won. He reminisced about those memories, as in that moment, he became one himself. Heinz of course was prepared, his strategy was genius, and a tactical victory wouldn't stop the multi-pronged advance toward a shattering army. Heinz knew this, and Nazari knew this too. Still, it was something. The inevitable news came, the fall of Mosul, the heart of their industry, and the inescapable fall of Baghdad next. Rather than let this drag on any further, he made a quick speech, packed his things, and saw Ikria for the last time. Few words were spoken that night in Berlin. I almost wish I had said more. I stared at him as he stared back. His flag was hoisted over the Hotel Bavaria, overlooking the city around. The face of modernity turned to the last remaining symbol of a world which no longer exists. The king sat in the underground palace, waiting for something indescribable, but sitting completely alone. It would all go on, further, it had to. There's no end and there cannot be one. What else is there to say, other than that things will continue, on and on and on. That night dragged on through an impossible hour, a night or morning without definition or scale. When the sun eventually rose, it wasn't a respite, but a burning penetration of the blanket that borderless eternity provides. Reality had returned, in all its tiring weight. The king's patience was gone. As John Lynch overthrew King McKenna, the Prussians silently watched. Lynch needed their support, and the Prussians knew this most of all. Lynch began flocking to foreign nations for help, opening embassies in France and Britain. Prussia didn't care. He was only another figurehead, serving a plan far beyond him in scope and in scale. France was no deterrent. News on the continent soon rang out. The Duke of Munster had died, the Regency Council had been formed, and all the powers in the land vied for control. With laborists on the streets and nationalists in the military, Prussia made moves towards the most shocking display yet. I trust you with this, Schuster. It is your plan and cannot fail. I promise you, it will not. Schuster rallied his forces, half implanted as citizens of Munster, as he planned to take over from within. Groups rose up demanding to join Prussia, small in size but loud and powerful. All other forces joined to repress them, as that repression was used as the justification for what followed. Schuster's forces marched into Munster without a word, occupying the surrounding countryside as their forces from within marched on the castle. The Duke called up his armies, but Prussia began mobilizing theirs too. France was terrified, but the gamble had paid off. Their army stood still, the Duke surrendering soon after in the face of the odds without foreign support. In a flash, Prussia had stood up and shook the Continental Order to its core, and as I sat back down, it looked like nobody would try to stop them. The king had glimpsed into the face of destruction, and saw what came out the other side. There would be no more half measures. It would be all or nothing. As the forces of Ireland schemed, the king sat back with a cold distance. He met with the Danes for assurance, as they agreed that Ireland's future would be decided by them. To Houston the admiral, the king said, "Keep this under control. Do so by any means you see fit." The Irish National Corps were established in Wexford, as Ireland was transformed to the PAZ's domain. The government was furious, and Prussia worked to establish their own parallel regime. Richard Mulcahy led the Irish National Corps, a face more powerful than Lynch's self-proclaimed protectorship. Lynch was afraid, and Mulcahy knew it. Whatever came ahead, decided the future of Ireland, and the Prussians were determined to shape it in the image that they saw fit. As internal opposition grew more and more, the National Corps would only fan those flames up higher. President Costello returned from exile, leading a revolt against Lynch's regime. The National Corps funded both sides of the war, as Mulcahy established a new domain in the south. Ireland fell into all-out war, as no side seemed to know just why they were fighting. Delusion turned to hysteria, each side fighting for an impossible end. Even the Prussians soon fell victim, with rage blinding their mind. Ireland became an existential battlefield, caused to detach from reality until the fight became the goal itself. Like incompetent gods, Lynch and Costello ensured the whole nation would suffer for their rivalry. And Prussia, seeing their new world changing beneath their feet, couldn't bear to let it go. The old president soon beat back Lynch, but the war was by no means over. The National Corps had turned the South into their parallel regime, as Costello was informed of his promotion to governor-president. He would manage internal affairs and nothing else. In the end, Costello was rendered impotent by the very power that made him in the first place. But as the National Corps made their plans for Ireland, it proved to be too much to bear. The hidden Fourth Force in the north, Edward Callahan's army in Belfast, immediately declared war against the Prussian occupiers. As the nation imploded inwards, Mulcahy went to Dublin to secure the capital. What he found at the presidential palace, however, was nothing. Costello had disappeared without telling a soul. The closest advisors of the old regime sat in silence, as the only even ceremonial unifier of the country had vanished entirely. Mulcahy stared down the streets of Dublin as he realized the fight that was ahead. Everything was crashing towards a decisive moment, one that can no longer be delayed. Dublin burned throughout the night, the presidential guard protecting the empty halls of the old capital. The government fled either the north or south, as the National Corps ransacked the gold reserve before returning to their stronghold in Wexford. Callahan began his march from the north, as Mulcahy rallied his forces to do the same. It all hinged on this. The schemes and policy mattered no more. Everything that we decided here and now. The king read the reports and waited, sitting in his palace, thinking of everything that had led up to this moment right now.